Good evening. Welcome to this West Orange Board of Education Special Public Board Meeting of March 24th, 2022. Ms. Flowers, would you kindly take the roll call?
Good evening. Roll call. Mrs. Huerta.
Here.
Mr. Rock.
Here.
Mr. Stevenson.
Here.
Vice President Rothstein.
Here.
President Tunnicliffe.
Here.
Notice of meeting. Please take notice that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided in the following manner: that a written notice was sent from the office of the Secretary of the Board at 4 p.m. on March 8th, 2022. That said notice was sent by regular mail to the West Orange Township Clerk and the editors of the West Orange Chronicle and the Star Ledger. That said notice was posted in the lobby of the Administration Building of the Board of Education.
Thank you. Could I ask the board to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And I would just like to recognize that this is Dr. Schoen's first meeting, official meeting with us. So last time, so nothing like throwing you right into the thick of things. We have your presentation on the budget. So take it away.
Good evening, everyone. It is absolutely my privilege and honor to serve as your interim superintendent. So President Tunnicliffe, thank you very much for the introduction. This evening, we have the opportunity to present to our community our preliminary 22-23 budget. We took a different tact in preparing our presentation this year. Our style was to tell a story, and we're hoping that we have the ability to do that. I do want to take the opportunity to thank our business administrator, Tanya Flowers, our assistant business administrator, Anna Flores, and our assistant superintendent of curriculum and instruction, Ebony DeMendez, for all of their help. They have worked tirelessly by my side in, I'm thinking probably the 8 days that I've been here. So with that said, if you would indulge me. We'd like to certainly thank our Board of Education members who have been nothing but supportive of everything that we have done so far. Thank you. There are 3 parts to our budget presentation this evening. The first part is how we formulate our district's budget. The second is a review of the January 19th special board meeting. And the third is our preliminary 22-23 district's budget. We need to take a look at our district. Certainly our students and our staff were comprised of 12 schools with 6,642 students. Our students' instructional, extracurricular, and athletic programs are supported by 786 certificated staff and 483 non-certificated. The formulation of our district budget is made up of a number of different areas. It's very important that we understand how those areas impact our budget regardless of the state aid that we receive. So here is the way our budget is funded. We're funded by our local tax levy, our tax bill, our state aid, our fund balance, which is savings reserved for emergency use, our bank cap, which is unused tax levy for use in the next 3 budgeted years. And what that means is that if you come in below that 2% cap, you have the ability to raise your budget in following years. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. Tuition and miscellaneous, and our capital and maintenance reserve accounts, as well as some other aid. So on January 19th, under Dr. Cascone's leadership, the board met And they held their public meeting based on the information that they had at the time. They had initial estimate projections for 3 large expenditures. They had estimated projections for health benefits, for transportation, and they also discussed some staffing requests. Dr. Gascon talked about 11 staffing requests that he would like to include in our budget for this year. He talked about a special education supervisor, K-5. Our special education population is growing. He talked about an assistant principal at Kelly, a grade 3 teacher at Hazel because of the enrollment as well, world language teachers to meet state mandates, 2 ESL teachers, our population too is growing exponentially, 3 special education teachers, and a supervisor of grants. Those 11 positions added up to approximately $878,000. So January 19th, the conversation continued. And it was explained by Ms. Flowers and Dr. Gascon that if our state aid came in flat, if we didn't receive anything more than we did for this year's budget, which is a little over 20 million, we projected at the time at the January 19th meeting that we would need in upwards of $2.6 million of reductions. This also included the use of that bank cap that I talked about a little earlier before. This happens to be the 3rd year. So if we don't use it, we lose it. Also, we wanted to include $1.8 million from our budgeted fund balance, and this preliminarily would equate to a 2.85% increase. Remember, that was on January 19th. So it's important to reinforce that preliminary really is preliminary. We didn't have actual estimated expenditures for those large ticketed areas. We didn't have health insurance. We didn't have transportation. We didn't have tuition. We didn't have special education staffing requests. We didn't have instructional supplies for those programs. We didn't have our utility costs, and we didn't have preschool special A full day information. So fast forward. The board had on its calendar a meeting for March 3rd, but we decided to cancel it because we didn't have any more information than we had back on January 19th. But what we started to do is we started to receive those projections that were more actual for our health benefits and for tuition and for transportation. And we quickly realized that on January 19th, the board was looking at 2.8. We were now looking at $9.2 million of reductions. And here's why that happened. We base our budget on a 2% tax levy increase, which is allowable by law. We can only go above that 2% tax levy if we utilize that bank cap, which is that allowable adjustment. When you take a look at the increases that started to come in, it's very clear to see that they were well above the 2%. Salaries were increasing by 3.4%, health benefits by nearly 10%, tuition out of district 8 to 10, transportation in district 5, and out of district was going up 30%. Now that's going up a great deal for a number of reasons, but most importantly, fuel costs and the inability to get drivers. So we have to keep that in mind. But we can see that those are well above 2%. So let's take a look at those expenditures. Let's take a look in actuality of what this really looked like for our preliminary 22-23 budget. The salaries make up approximately 58% of our budget, benefits about 16 or about 30 million, and special ed at 21 million. If you go all the way down to the bottom of that slide, you're looking at about 183 million, but those top 3 areas take up a whole bunch of our budget, and most of which are locked in. We can't really control that. So we quickly got to work. We didn't know how much state aid we were going to receive. We were basing everything that we were doing on flat state aid. So we started to make some reductions, some supplies, materials. We started to do that. What we didn't want to do ever is affect our staff or our programs. And then Thursday, March 10th arrived, and the news was out. Our state aid figures are released, over $29 million. This was an over $9 million increase. It was a great day, to say the least, for West Orange, a great day. So now our objective significantly changed. Instead of having to go 9.2, we only had to, or rather, had to reduce our budget by about 200,000. It was a game changer. So here is what is excluded and here is what's included, because remember, we had to go down a little bit. We had to reduce. We did remove the assistant principal at Kelly. We did remove the special education supervisor, and we did remove the request, remember, back on January 19th for a world language teacher. Those three positions equated to about $277,000. So what does our budget include? Our 22-23 preliminary budget includes all current staff, all instructional, extracurricular, and all athletic programs. It also includes a grade 3 teacher at Hazel that we talked about on the 19th, a world language teacher, 2 ESL teachers, and 3 special education teachers. In addition, it also includes an emotional regulation impairment teacher at Redwood, a social studies teacher at the high school, a resource teacher at St. Cloud, and paraprofessionals, all IEP driven, approximately 11. It also includes, because of increased enrollment and IEP needs, as well as the preschool expansion aid eligibility, an occupational therapist, a speech therapist, a child study team, a behavioralist, and preschool teachers. If we're going to take our preschool disabled program from a half-time endeavor this year to full-time, we need to increase our team members to support our students. So that's why we have this. Our budget also includes much needed capital improvement projects. We truly believe we should make a significant investment in our infrastructure. These projects equate to about $2.4 million. We divided our projects into 3 areas: HVAC, or heating, ventilating, air conditioning, structural, and safety and health. The first is for Roosevelt. It's a classroom union ventilator control. Also Roosevelt, an Airedale unit replacement, Roosevelt reheat coil and control valve replacement, and Edison Airedale unit replacement. These unit ventilators and replacements are approximately 15 to 22 years old. So it is definitely their time. The second set of capital projects is structural. The Washington retaining wall, which has been a topic of conversation for some time, is set as our capital projects within our budget. The Washington exterior masonry foundation settlement, architect fees for various projects, as well as the Hazel retaining wall and affected playground. Health and safety, of course, is equally important, and the ability to communicate with our students and our staff, hence the reason for Roosevelt and Mount Pleasant with an intercom system. Roosevelt gym floor replacement. The high school stage floor, much needed. Our wonderful maintenance department keeps doing all that they can, but that room in that environment is just so awesome. The stage needs to reflect that room as well. The Mount Pleasant, the kiss and go, it is not as safe as it should be for our students to be dropped off to enter the school. And the Roosevelt main entrance vestibule door frame. Again, the total cost is about $2.3 million. Important to note, these projects are funded by utilizing fund balance without depleting our capital reserve or increasing our taxes. So important to note. So let's look at the tax impact. In order to balance the budget this year, we will use the following revenue sources to pay our expenditures. We're going to use the tax levy, bank cap, state aid, other aid, and budgeted fund balance. When you take a look at the revenues and the amount on the side, what this is showing you is that we have a balanced budget. We need approximately $183 million. And this slide separates out how much we are getting in each of those areas for revenue. So how do we calculate the tax levy? There are 3 areas that we use to calculate a tax levy. We use our general fund, our operating expenses. We use, in this case, our bank cap, which is that unused tax levy. And we have to include our debt service fund, which is the repayment of our building construction bonds and lease purchase agreements. All 3 of these areas are utilized to determine the tax increase. So when we look at determining the tax levy increase in those 3 areas, you can see what equates to those 3 areas and the cost, from the general fund, of course, being the largest, We are making the recommendation administratively that the board consider the use of that bank cap so that we don't use it. If we don't use it, we lose it. And the debt service also comes into play when determining what that tax impact is. So when we look at all of those things and we put them together, our recommendation and our final figures look at a 2.42% tax increase for an average assessed home in West Orange. Second column, you'll see is about $336,000, and this equates to an average monthly increase of about $18.14, again, based on an average assessed house. So what is the benefit of going above the 2% cap when there are often community members, and understandably so, that will say, we don't want to pay a lot in taxes. Please try to come below that 2% because it'll make a difference for us. The district has the ability of increasing this year's budget by an additional $1.2 million of bank cap, which enables us to sustain a higher base for future budgets. Let me explain. If we go below that 2%, we need to always realize that our annual expenses will always exceed the 2% cap. They always will. So if we can only go up to 2% and everything goes up higher than that 2%, we're already going to be in a place where we're going to have to reduce. And that place is going to be significant, where those reductions are not going to be materials or instructional supplies. The only way for us to reach that deficit is going to be staff and programming. So every year we begin the budget process in a deficit, and we know that. And this is further compounded if we go below the 2% cap. So let's look at it a little bit. On the left-hand side, we have the tax levy for literal tax levy for the 21-22 school year, and that is coming in at 2%. And then the tax levy below cap on the other side. So let's draw up some scenarios. If we go up to the 2% allowable by law, we're looking at approximately $2.8 million, or in total, we're looking at $146 million for the 22-23 budget. Now, what does it look like if we don't come in? If we started the budget on 21-22 at the $143 million, but the board decided only to raise it by 1%. If you compare those two numbers, you're seeing automatically, right, that you're only getting half of the money that you typically would in revenues, which would bring us to a total of 145. And you can see that difference between the 145 and 146. Let's do one more. Again, 2% allowable by law. Add those numbers together. Now we have a base of 149. Now let's not use the 1% anymore. Let's go back to 2%. So if we look at 2% in the below cap category, and you can just compare the numbers a little bit, you can see the difference between the 2.9 at the 2% in the left and the 2% in the right, and you see you're already beginning to go down on your base. If you do that year after year, you'll begin to see, as you look at the numbers, the difference in how it's beginning to spread out. And finally, the total compounded revenue for the 5 years that are depicted on that screen is $14 million. We have developed that revenue simply by coming in at 2%. If you look at the left, just with 1 year coming in at 1%, the total revenues that we have there is $13 million. The difference between the two is about $1.5 million. That $1.5 million, we will never be able to recoup. That $1.5 million is so many programs, so many staff members, so many services that we provide. So we put ourselves in a deficit, and we're already starting that way if we go below that cap. Let's take a look at the historical viewpoint of this a little bit, just so you can have an understanding. There are 9 years depicted on this chart. You can see through the 9 years that there were choices made to go below cap, choices made to go above cap. The choices made at the time were the right choices at the time. Our intent for you this evening is just to explain that although West Orange absolutely held at an average of approximately 2%, that in moving forward and coming below and going above, we're losing some of that revenue. And we believe that in moving forward with the percentages of those high expenditure areas going up as much as they are, that we will remain in a deficit, and it will be harder and harder as the budgets unfold and years unfold for us to be able to maintain the great and excellent programs that we have here. Finally, before we take any questions that there may be, we do have a budget approval timeline. March 24th, of course, is today. The board will be asked to vote on the preliminary budget this evening. March 28th, we'll submit that to the county. Ms. Flowers will. April 20th is the county approval of that budget by April 20th. We do have a meeting scheduled for April 28th if we need a follow-up budget work session. And finally, on May 9th, there'll be a public hearing for the adoption of the final budget. So that pretty much concludes our presentation for this evening. I hope that it was informative and understandable and enlightens not only all of us here, but for those that are watching us virtually. That's it for me so far. President Tunnicliffe, I don't know if you want to open up the floor. I know you're going to remain here to any member of the public. Okay, I do. Mr. Kramer, would you like to ask any questions? Wonderful. The mic is yours. I've just been given permission.
My first question is that approximately $183 million.
I'm sorry, Mr. Kramer, please state your name and address for the record.
Adam Kramer, 20 Moran Road, West Orange, New Jersey. My first question is that $183 million, which is your total expenditures. In actuality, would it be fair to say that at the end of the day, when the final audit is done a year and a half from now on this budget, with everything included, including FICA payments, pension payments, and et cetera, ballpark, would that figure be closer to $215 million? Second, I noted based on enrollment and based on headcount, you employ about 5 people or adults for every 1 child. How is that ratio compared to surrounding districts? Also, I noticed your labor costs are going up. You seem to pay more than surrounding districts as a general rule. Is that really sustainable for our tax base? Third, I noticed you're going to go to over 9,000 for an average household. The rate in this town is going to be about 2.7% of assessed. By all my calculations, that's about the highest anywhere, certainly the highest in Essex. I couldn't find any place in New Jersey, and bluntly anywhere in the country, that's 2.7% for a school tax levy. I hope we're not number 1 in that category, because it's not a good category to be part of. And those are my questions / concerns.
Okay, Mr. Kramer, there's some questions that I can answer. There's some questions that I'm going to ask the business administrative team to do. There are other questions that I assuredly know that we won't be able to answer only because we don't have those figures in front of us. You talked about being able to sustain increases. Which increase or what increases are you referring to?
Well, you have structurally put into your teachers' union contract, the bus drivers' contract, the custodians' contract, the administrative contract raises. Now, you're getting a lot of state aid this year. The state some years giveth, some years taketh away. That's just the way it works. But you have sustained increases brought into the biggest part of your budget. What's going to happen next year if the state has a budget problem and takes things away? You've built in escalation clauses to your labor cost, and you're going to be in a big pickle next year if you continue to grow staff.
We may very well be in a pickle. I don't know what it is that's going to occur next year. I'm hoping that we're poised to be in a better spot.
Well,
May I, Mr. Kramer?
Yes.
But what I do believe is the agreement that was made with the administrators and the board and the teachers and the board. The teachers are the heart of our school district that are worth their weight, and our administrators in gold, Mr. Kramer. So they are by far, our students and our staff are it. when it comes to West Orange. And without them, we are nothing. So in regard to sustaining their increases, I absolutely support what it is that the board has decided in the most recent of contract negotiations. And we will have to figure out what we will have to figure out if we are in a different place next year. But the place certainly not to skimp on, Mr. Kramer, is our staff.
I agree with you that staff are important, and I agree with you that teachers and staff are good people who need to be paid. But the problem is you can't pay them more than the tax base can sustain. That's my point.
I understand what you're saying. We are paying them what it is that they rightfully deserve at this point. Moving forward, we are going to have to, I think every district, Mr. Kramer, is going to have to be more creative with what we're looking at. But I do understand your point, and I hope you understand mine as well. There are some questions, Mr. Kramer, related to FICA. I don't know if you want to address that.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Kramer. The question about FICA, that is a reasonable 215 million, a reasonable estimate if you're looking at what the audit will be, but that's not our budget. We don't pay for the taxes, or excuse me, for the FICA payments. As you know, that's a GASB report that we have to report the financials that go towards the FICA and the TPAF payments, but that is not something that is affecting our tax levy.
Respectively, Ms. Flowers, every citizen of West Orange is a
Mr.
citizen
Kramer.
of New Jersey.
Mr. Kramer, you do have 3 minutes, and we don't usually have the back and forth dialogue like this. I am answering your questions, and I appreciate the comments. Thank you.
Okay, at this point, President Tunnicliffe, there don't seem to be any other questions from the public. So if it is okay with you, we can return, and the meeting, of course, is back to you. Thank you.
Okay. Do any of the board members have any comments or questions you'd like to make on the presentation of the preliminary budget?
Thank you. Thank you, President Tunnicliffe, and thank you, Dr. Schoen, for your presentation. I just want to thank Dr. Schoen for her leadership, working through the transition with Dr. Cascone. Thank the board for its work. It's an honor to serve with these fine citizens of West Orange, for the promotion and really protection of our students and our programs and our staff. And I just want to again commend Dr. Schoen, Ms. Flowers, Ms. Flores, Mr. Mendez, and the entire team for their work. Again, it's just really good to see the community coming together around something as critical as education. This community must have strong schools. And in having strong schools, we must make tough decisions in order to support the strong schools that we need. And so I think the budget presentation tonight really reflects, the commitment of this board, the commitment of the administration to do what's right for our students and our teachers. And again, I just want to thank the team for its work.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Mr. Rock?
Yes, thank you all for this as well. It was a thorough presentation. And to echo Mr. Stevens's comments, I think this budget invests where we need to in this district, and I think next year will be better for it. So I'm thankful that we got the state aid that we did this year so we can make some of those investments.
Thank you, Mr. Rock. Ms. Huerta?
Thank you, President Tunnicliffe. Thank you to the administration and Dr. Schoen. And I didn't get to thank Dr. Cascone as he left, but I feel that we are in a better position now, more stable than in previous years. But definitely this budget, I feel, has a lot of promise to it. And so it is setting us up for a brighter future that we are used to here in West Orange. So thank you to the community and to my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Huerta. Vice President Rothstein.
Thank you. I think well, actually, let me start with just a question. And Mrs. Flowers, I don't know if you have this information in front of you, but I know we've got the 1.2 in bank cap available this year. What I don't recall is whether we have bank cap for next year or the following year. Do you know offhand?
Yes, there is another amount of 900,000 approximately available. And then once that goes away, there's no more bank.
We
cap.
don't have any more,
No.
unless we were to go under the 2% this
Correct.
year, in which case it would be whatever amount was under that.
Correct. Or if there were any other allowable adjustments provided by the state.
Thank you. Yeah, I think really where my head is at again, and it's really very much, I think, the same thing that going through the budget last year that I was thinking is that terrific slide that shows the impact of 1 year with a 1% tax levy instead of a 2%. And, you know, the challenge of being in this position and trying to come up with a budget that is sensitive to the community and at the same time funds the schools and maintains the excellence of the school mission. There are times when we've all felt it makes sense to go under that 2% because that's what's right for the community at the time, especially if we feel we can afford it. And then when you look at it historically, it comes back and bites us. It comes back and the only way to maintain any of the cuts is, as Dr. Schoen said, to make significant cuts in staffing and in programming, which is really the alternative that I see. We can either be a community that helps our schools long-term by doing the 2% increases year after year to make sure that we're not ending up with that 1.5 million gap after 10 years or however many years we're on that slide. Or we can be a community that looks at what we're offering and says, it's not worth it to us anymore. We think we're offering too much. We think we have too big a staff. We think administration is overstaffed and we just want to slash. And then that's a really important discussion to have in the community about what the impact of those kinds of cuts will be on the schools, on the property values, on the education and our mission to educate students. That's really, I think, what the whole discussion really boils down to. I think that slide made an excellent point, and you know, again, just really appreciate the storytelling this year, the setup, and the ability to help clarify how, you know, even with that $9 million increase from the state this year, what that does is that puts us in a position where we can maintain without cutting drastically. Long-term, sustainable, only if the state keeps increasing what they send us. Eventually, we've got a big wrestling match coming. So anyway, those are the thoughts on my mind right now. Thank you so much. Oh, one other question, just with regards to the timing. So with our vote tonight, if we vote in favor of the preliminary budget, this goes to the county. And then there might be adjustments in the next presentation we see, or do we expect everything to remain the same?
Based on the approval tonight, based on the board vote, it will go to the county and all the numbers are and documents are in order. The county approves it. There should be no other adjustments needed.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Vice President Rothstein. Quick question. Have we ever had a situation where the county would not approve a budget?
I have not seen it.
Okay,
No, I have not seen. I don't know if that's ever been conducted here.
okay. I was just curious if that's ever.
That's not here.
Okay,
It happens.
thank you. You know, and I certainly want to echo the comments of all of my board colleagues and thank Dr. Schoen for her leadership. And it's remarkable what you can kind of pull together in 8 days. And thank you to to Mr. Mendez and Ms. Flowers and Ms. Flores. I know it's been a lot of work for all of you to pull this together in a very short period of time. So we certainly appreciate that. And I do appreciate the story that this tells, because I do think that, at the end of the day, this is a district of stories for our students, our teachers, all the good things that come out of our school district. And, we need the resources to be able to do what we do on a daily basis. And I think our team here does a remarkable job. And we have wonderful teachers, we have wonderful staff, a caring community, and I'm proud to be able to present this budget to the community tonight. And thank you so much for all of your efforts. Oh, do you want? Sure.
I'm so sorry. There was one, I might be wrong about this, but there's a slide in the printed deck that I'm not sure if it got skipped or if I just missed it. But under capital projects structural, the projects for the Edison ranking and reappointment of exterior and repair main entrance stairs, West Orange turnoff roof, and Gregory roof. Did I see that? Was that presented? I might have just missed it on the. It was on the screen. Thank you. I must have just been looking the other way when it came up. Thank you.
Okay, so at this time, I would like to have a motion to approve the preliminary budget resolution.
I move that we approve the preliminary budget.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Ms. Flowers, could you take a vote?
Okay, Mrs. Huerta,
Yes.
Mr. Rock,
Yes.
Mr. Stevenson,
Yes.
Vice President Rothstein,
Yes.
President Tunnicliff.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, so let's see, this was all items 1, 2, 3. We have a second petitions and hearings of citizens. You have 3 minutes on the clock. Please come to the mic, state your name and address for the record.
Adam Kramer, 20 Moran Road, West Orange, New Jersey. I look at this budget process and respectfully, I don't think you're making tough decisions. I don't think you're advocating for taxpayers. You have probably the most heavily taxed taxpayers just about anywhere, and you're raising taxes on them. As Ms. Flowers indicated, the real expenditure is going to be about 215 million. Your enrollment is about 6,600 students. That means you're going to spend over 30,000 per student per year. Your staff count gives you a 5-to-1 ratio of employees for students. So every one employee has equals 5 students. Those, with a little creativity, you can provide a really quality education on a lesser budget. You're probably about 135% of state average in spending on per student. You're well about double the national average. And your employee to student ratio is, very generous. There's limits to what the taxpayers can bear. I have to live here. I have an averaged house, a townhouse, 3,300, assessed at $3,300. I'm going to pay about $9,000 a year in taxes. I can afford it, fortunately, but not everybody can. This is going to push seniors out. This is going to deny people who want young couples starting in life with a family who want that dream house the opportunity to come to West Orange. It's going to mean that it's going to be very difficult for my children and my peers' children to come back and afford to live here. And it's going to harm landlords. And we think, well, who cares about landlords? That means that people with really modest incomes won't be able to afford rent here. And you're going to be doing this on a regressive tax on rent just passed through by landlords. So you're also setting ourselves up for future problems when the revenue streams dries up from the states. I don't think they're going to be this generous going forward. So while I think you're good people, I think the teachers are important and education is valuable. I think you're being too generous with the taxpayers' money and you're not making tough decisions that you were put here to make. And it's a real problem for all of us that have to support this. And so I respectively think that what's going on here is really wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kramer. I just want to note also that we do not have any submissions from the Google form tonight. So correct? Yes. So just want to let the public know that. Do you want to respond at all or in regard to any of the comments? Or?
Mr. Kramer, am I on, Lauren? I want to thank you for your comments. And you're speaking, like all of our board members, from a tax-paying perspective. While we can agree to disagree in regard to the formulation of the budget and the overall vote, I think it's important that you understand that going above the 2% this year isn't trying to make up for that deficit that we would have if we didn't. That above that 2% allowable by law are program needs. They're based on what it is that our students have that we don't have a lot of control over. This is not a budget that is filled with frills. It's not a budget that says we want to put in a new stadium. It's not a budget of want. It's a budget of need. And I think that that's just an important thing to kind of keep in mind, that while we may agree to disagree, in order to maintain what it is that we have here and address the IEP needs of our students and the services for other students, it is a budget of need. So I just wanted to offer that to you and know that it isn't one of what I'm referring to as frills. Perhaps there's a better word, but I hope I could just make that clear to everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Schoen. Okay. So do we have any reports from the board members, or we can put those off till Monday since we have a meeting coming up. So why don't we wait on that? And because we have a meeting coming up March 28th, that's this coming Monday at 7:30 p.m. right here at West Orange High School in our wonderful Library Media Center. We do not have an executive session after this. So that means when we close out this meeting, there will be no other business discussed. And we wish you all a good night. Thank you for joining us for this budget presentation, and have a motion to, oh, sorry. Could I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. This meeting is now adjourned.